In this video, I'm going to demonstrate Petrissage techniques to the front of the leg, focusing on the quadriceps region. Prior to doing our Petrissage techniques, we would have warmed the area up and applied the massage medium using the effleurage technique. Okay, so the medium that I'm using today is lotion from Physique. But if your preference is oil, wax or cream, then that's absolutely fine as well. Just for the purposes of the video that I'm using lotion. Okay, quite often as well, it might be your client's preference as to which medium you use. Because if you've got a very hairy client, then sometimes oil might be easier because it's a bigger molecule and it might not pull the hairs out quite as much. Okay, so need to prepare the area. Now, sometimes you might need to tuck the towel in underneath the client's other leg to make sure that it's out the way. Now, we need to make sure that we are exposing all of the treatment area because we want to come into as much of the muscle tissue as possible. Now, whilst we're doing the Petrissage techniques and we're focusing on the quadriceps group, which is the top of the front of the leg, we're also including the adductors as well, or otherwise known as the inner thighs within the treatment too. Okay, so just to apply the medium, I'm just going to do 1 or 2 effleurage movements. Okay, so remember you're applying the medium when the hand is onto the client's limb, just to make sure that you're reducing any chance of spillage. Okay, we're warming the medium up before we then place our hands onto the client. So with effleurage, we've got these hands in the opposite direction, and we're just literally going to warm the area, apply that medium, and making sure that we've got good coverage over the tissue. Okay, so the first Petrissage technique that I'm going to move into is the kneading technique. Now again, we need to think about our own posture. If our posture is good, that means we're going to get an even pressure when we're applying the technique. It's also important to look after your own posture too. So when I'm face on doing these Petrissage techniques, I'm in a squat position, okay? And you are using the legs to move up and down as you're applying the technique too. Abdominals are engaged to help you to support the back. Now with kneading, our hands are working at a slightly different time. So one hand is going to come round and we're moving the thumb towards the finger. As you do that, the elbow is coming out to the side and you're lifting the shoulder up. So the shoulder and the elbow are important in this movement. We're trying to lift the tissue. Now with all of our Petrissage techniques, we're applying a transverse stretch to the muscle. Okay. Trying to get that lift. So hopefully, as you can see, one hand, we bring the fingers round to the thumb, and as the fingers are getting closer to the thumb with one hand, then the other hand is coming in. So the two hands are working together, but at a slightly different time. Okay, so this is our kneading Petrissage technique. I'm coming into the adductors and covering all of the quadriceps, coming up towards the hip joint and also covering the lateral aspect as well. So we're getting into the vastus lateralis and also around that iliotibial band area. Okay, so kneading, which is a Petrissage technique, to the front of the leg. Then before we move on to our next Petrissage technique, which is ringing, we would just flush in the direction of the lymphatic and the blood flow with that effleurage movement. Again, so as I've come into that effleurage movement, I've moved my body position and I'm now back in that lunge position. And we're going to move into ringing. So with ringing, we've got one hand pointing downwards. The other hand is going to point upwards. Now at first when we're applying this technique, it's nice to get that squeeze first. So we squeeze the two hands together. This lifts the tissue up and applies a very slight upward stretch. Then from here, we're literally going to move one hand over to one side and the other hand over to the other side. Okay. Now, as we get nearer towards the top of the leg, we're just moving those hands in a little bit of a diagonal position. Okay, so we would generally do this about 3 to 4 times up and down the leg before we then flush with our effleurage. Now again, if you've got more time in your treatment, then you might do this maybe 5 or 6 times. Okay, so making sure each time you take that time to squeeze those hands together to lift that tissue up. And again, we're providing a nice transverse stretch to the tissue. Okay, so then back into effleurage. Just 2 to 3 sweeps here. And then we're going to move into our final Petrissage technique, which is rolling. So with this, it's providing a superficial stretch to the fascial area. So you're trying to stretch the skin over the underlying muscle, which then might produce a little bit of a stretch on that connective fascia. Okay, so I always start with the hands like a triangle position. So you're going to place the hands onto the leg. Okay, and then you're going to squeeze the thumbs and the fingers together. Then from here, your thumbs are going to move towards the fingers. So I'm just going to demonstrate that again. So again, we're squeezing to lift the tissue in between the fingers and the thumbs, and we're moving those thumbs towards the fingers. And as I move those thumbs towards the fingers, you can see that roll in the tissue there. Okay, so then we would do this about 2 to 3 times across the limb. Okay, so I'm going to start laterally or closer to me and move my thumbs towards my fingers. My thumbs now stay where they were, and then I'm going to stretch my fingers away from my thumbs. I'm going to squeeze and then thumbs to fingers. And one more time, squeeze, thumbs to fingers. And then I'm sweeping my hands back. Again, squeeze, thumbs to fingers, stretch, squeeze, thumbs to fingers, stretch, and again, squeeze, and thumbs to fingers. So in these foundation Petrissage movements, this is quite a superficial stretch, but it still feels quite nice for the client, and it's still aiding with mobility of the tissue. And we'd work our way all the way up towards the top of the leg, near the hip. And as we get nearer to the top of the leg, just to maintain our client's dignity, again, we're coming in that diagonal direction. Okay. And then I'm going to do that same technique, but now working down the leg. And again, depending on your treatment time, more often than not, we would do this up and down the leg 2 to 3 times. Again, if you've got more treatment time available, you could spend longer on this technique. And then once you've finished, again, we're going to flush with our effleurage. And then within our wider treatment, we might then move on to applying superficial frictions and mobility to the knee area. So mobility to patella, superficial frictions around the knee joint, and then moving down to the shin region. Okay, so that was a demonstration of Petrissage to the front of the leg, focusing on that quadricep area.